Greetings gamers, and welcome to the 105th livestream from the MisfitGamersStudios. I'm your host Vortex, and this is D&D Discussions. On today's episode, we are going to be discussing the history of rest and healing. Excuse me, I'm going to do that one more time. On today's episode, we are going to be discussing the history of rest and healing. We're going to go all the way back to first edition and look at how rest has changed and how rest specifically, its effect on healing has changed. And then after that, we're through first edition all the way to 5th edition, and then we're going to be looking at the various ways that healing has been done through each of those editions, including magical healing, natural healing, and potions and the like. So it's going to be kind of interesting. This is probably not going to be the longest stream today. I probably will not be going off too many tangents. I've been so busy with projects today. As many of you may or may not be aware, there was quite a big event that happened to affect my ability to do my job most of today. So I got to do a lot of fun home projects, but I kind of got a late start, so I kind of scrambled to get this stream together. I didn't want to cancel it, but I was this close. But you know what? I'm glad I'm here now that I've started. Big Dungeon, how's it going? I saw you sneak in there. Just working on some prep for tomorrow. That is awesome. Is tomorrow one of your actual gaming sessions? Is that going to be like another big benchmark? I'm trying to think, what was the question I was actually trying to ask? Sorry, I am so just everywhere. Is this the same gaming group as the Dragons? That's what I was trying to ask. Are you prepping for the Dragons gaming group? Boy, I'll get through this, I swear. I'll get through this, y'all. We will get through this. It'll be a fun time, and we will get some information. Fun note, I've been, so I have the first official short that I am going to do. I have the first official short done, ready to post. So we have our first short. I am so excited. It turned out, it wasn't 100% what I had in my brain, but for how close it is, I'm quite impressed with just absolutely how I was able to do that. Probably gonna be a lot of RP for tomorrow. Nice, okay. So that is one thing on TikTok or YouTube. So right now we just have the YouTube accounts and everything, but I think what's gonna happen over the weekend, since Kage and I are gonna be doing some background and admin work a lot this weekend on the Discord, on the leaderboard, and some stuff to prep for affiliate for the coming months. One of the things that I want to do is get all of my accounts situated properly so we can start prepping for this new content. My goal was to have stuff posted by the end of the month, but I am probably going to wait till the 1st of next month, or at least maybe, on stream. Maybe I'll do a post, because that would be kind of cool to actually do the post like live on stream. But I want to have a good benchmark to begin it just so I can track it better. We didn't get affiliate just yet, so right now, where are we at? We finally got our followership. So like 2 weeks ago, we finally hit our followership, and then now we're past that. So all great there. We have enough followers and we're growing. But as of right now, we are at 2.85 out of the 3 needed for the congruent watchers or the congruent viewers, and that's just because 2 of my streams, one of my weekend streams and one of our review streams, was just down, so it just happened. So we're right around there. As soon as we get those concurrent viewers up, we're already maxing out at like an average of 5 right now. So it's only going to take a couple days and a couple of those streams to shift those numbers again. So I'm hopeful things are going to be good. But we are that close to hitting affiliate, and then I don't know what happens after that. Like, I don't know if I just apply for it. I don't know if it's, I don't think it's automatic, but I don't know how the whole thing works. So we're just trying to prep for it because we have enough followers, and once we hit those viewerships, it's gonna happen. So it's automatic. Okay, cool. And they send an email. Sweet. So yeah, so once we get our viewership up, that's it. We should switch over, and then hopefully this weekend we will have all of our plans finalized for what we want to do when we hit affiliate. And then next month, since I gotta wait for payday, next month, once I get paid, I will probably be siphoning some money and budgeting it towards the stream, and I will actually contact the artists that I want to work with and get a bunch of our stuff set up for like our emotes and things like that. So a lot of stuff is exciting. I knew a lot of stuff would happen really, really quickly. So it's really cool to see all this happening. But yeah, it's almost there, but we're getting there. It's close. I have a lot of plans for what to do with YouTube and everything. So yeah, so we're going to set up all of the accounts. We're going to have everything situated this weekend. And yeah, I'm planning on posting on both TikTok and YouTube. The one downside is that, what is it? TikTok is up to 3 minutes and YouTube is capped at 60 seconds. So it's kind of one of those things where I have to start deciding, do I want to start making dual content? Do I want to start making 3 minute, up to 3 minute shorts that only go on TikTok and then have a 1 minute version of that same short that goes on YouTube? Or do I just treat them separately? You know what I mean? Or do I just make up to 3 minute content, and if it's over a minute, it goes on TikTok, and then anything else goes on both? You'll follow both. Mostly watch TikToks, mostly, and that's kind of the thing too. I've heard a lot about when people start posting, they do tend to get a nice little influx of viewership, because I feel like that's the biggest thing, is no one really grows on Twitch alone. You really need the other platforms. YouTube's great to grow independently. Twitch is great to grow independently, but I feel like TikTok and YouTube Shorts are probably gonna be the two areas that I at least start to garner some interest. So yeah, I'm just trying to figure, how do I just best utilize the recordings? Because I know I want to like just mass post them, right? Like once I make a short or a video, I just want to like be able to post it. But I only have so much time. I don't want, yeah, I appreciate it. I don't want to overthink it, but I only have so much finite time. So at first, I'm probably just going to focus on 60-second shorts, because I know I can just post to both YouTube and Twitch, and just if they're within 20 to 60 seconds, that'll be fine. But once I start getting better at editing and I really start to get better at the like longer content, and I start adding more together, that's when I really want to like be prepared on, do I want to have TikTok only content, or do I just want to have a long and short version of the same thing, I guess. So I'll play around with that, but I think for right now, it's a challenge just to get a 60-second. My first short's only 20 seconds. I'm very proud of it, but it's going to be really interesting to try to like crop things down to 60. So I think I'll just focus on that goal, and we'll see where we go with it. You got a bunch of followers from TikTok. Yeah, I'm kind of hoping for that, but I'm also kind of like, I don't know. We'll see. We're hopeful. But yeah, it's a lot, and then a lot is going on with work. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about that yet. And then of course, stuff going on around the house. We just got some stuff in, so I've been working mostly of today, just beautifying the house for the first time in 2 years. So, lots of going on. It only takes one to go viral, and the funniest thing is, like, of course, no one makes a viral video, right? Like, I absolutely know, like, yeah, it only takes one. You had one go semi-viral, had 600 plus followers on TikTok. Wow, that's dope. Yeah, it's so funny. I absolutely understand that nobody truly goes viral, or I don't say goes viral. Nobody like intentionally makes a viral video. That's what I'm trying to say. Nobody like sets out to be like, this video is going viral, right? You can't really like decide to make a viral video. But the very first one I made, it's just something that's stuck in my head ever since the moment happened on Twitch, and it's just one of those things where I find it so hilarious that it's gonna be baffling to me that, because it's not D&D related. It's when I was playing Sea of Thieves with Vixie, and so I'm kind of finding it hilarious that I find that little short so funny that watch that be the thing that blows up, like that be my like, even not necessarily viral, but that be like the best video that pops off at first, and none of my D&D stuff does. I would just find that so funny and ironic that it's my gaming content that pops off on TikTok, and then they come here and all I do is talk about D&D. That would just be, it would be hilarious, but it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? I'm having fun. Learning editing is actually not as terrifying as I thought it would be. Premiere Pro is complex, but it's actually not as... It's not as overwhelming as I thought it would be, and trying to piece together what I want to do. A lot of it is, I think the hardest part is putting to words what I'm trying to do well enough to ask Google or ask YouTube to show me a video. Because there was one thing I was really trying to figure out, because I basically, like in the short, it was like mainly the video on top was of my gameplay. But at one point, not only did I want to dub in audio, but I wanted to clip a very specific like portion of another scene of another clip. I wanted to just clip down like a very small window and then track that onto my gameplay at a specific moment. And I didn't know how to articulate what I wanted to do, but I knew what it looked like in my head. So it took me about an hour to finally find a good video that was like talking about what I needed to do. And after that, it just became, it kind of clicked. So I'm hopeful that I can pick up other stuff. It's going to be rough, but I also have learned after watching TikToks and Instagram Reels and a lot of YouTube Shorts, editing prowess does help, but it's not necessary to make a good short. I will have to I have to constantly remind myself that it doesn't take good editing skills to make a great short. It just takes a good idea, right? And that's where I'm going with. I'm trying to just stick with the mindset of, if like right now I'm on my off time or when I'm working, I'm listening to my old content. I'm just going through all of the old live streams, and if I hear something that just sounds like, if I were to just scroll through YouTube, if I just hear a sentence or a conversation that Kage and I are having, I'll document the timestamp, and that's what I'm going to start doing, is just go back to those timestamps and be like, I'm just going to pull this out, edit out all the crap, and I'm just going to make that like little chunks at a time, because I do not have the time to edit like my entire live stream into an edited episode yet. I'll probably end up having to pay someone for that, because that's just gonna be way too much time. Let's see, what is it? Sounds good. Light is probably the biggest things besides the actual idea. Oh, good sound and good lighting. Yeah, that's the other thing that, it's funny watching my old content. I'm still in the phase of our very old microphones, so I'm waiting to see when as we transition how we've gotten better. But I think once I start doing more of these shorts and I'm actually playing with the raw audio, the raw video, I think once I'm in there messing around with it, because I do know that you can do a lot of stuff with what is it called, luminous settings or whatever, or luminous effects. But I know that there's a lot of things you can do to help improve it. But I think once I start doing shorts on some of the more recent episodes, once I catch up, I think I'm going to start noticing like those issues that I may not notice right now. Like we've worked a lot on the lighting in here. I think it looks good from my perspective, but I don't know how it's going to be when I'm starting to edit. So I'm really curious to see how that's going to change our setup and how I'm going to start to reorganize things, because it is funny how many changes we've done just in terms of not just equipment, but positioning, settings wise. We've done quite a bit to just, to work on all of this. So, it's taking time, but it's fun. We're enjoying it. Oh, let's see here. All right. Well, that was some fun updates, but I guess we can get started with today's topic. All right. So, I'm really interested in this one because it's one of the main reasons why I wanted to do the History of series, is to really highlight the advancements and changes that Wizards of the Coast and D&D has had over the years, especially regarding player satisfaction. And a lot of the times we've been doing this, we've been kind of either surprised at how little things have changed, or the specific aspects of the way that things changed. But we haven't, I think, found anything that's been, overly drastic from one, from one edition to the next, or at least from first all the way to fifth. And while I don't have any access to the newest stuff, obviously fifth edition is obviously still evolving, but I feel this one is going to be really good because I think this one highlights one of the largest jumps from the older editions to the newer editions. I think maybe magic and the way that spellcasting was done, I think that might have been one of the biggest that we've covered so far. But more so, I think this one's going to cover more of that. Or, excuse me, it's not going to cover more of that, but it's going to have a larger a gap, I think, or a larger jump, but not as late in the game as I thought. I would have expected this one to have updated much sooner, but it is going to be kind of interesting to walk through. So we are going to start with the history of rest, more specifically how rest ties into healing throughout the editions. So as always, we are going to start way back in the old days of first edition. We're not going to go back as far as OD&D because I don't have, like I said, I kind of scrambled to get all of this stuff together, so I don't have the specifics for OD&D. I can try one more time. But yeah, I don't think I have anything. Yeah, okay, yeah. That's what you get when you try to scramble. But yeah, so we're going to start with just AD&D, first edition. Where did we start? So with resting for primary characters, might be shocking to a lot of you who've only played 5th edition, but HP was not as grandiose in the early editions, so you didn't get large stacks of HP throughout your campaign. You relatively stayed pretty low. You usually started with your hit die, and that's really all you got. But yeah, you really didn't get much in terms of expansion. So in the early days, the mindset was more focused on damage was supposed to be felt. Damage was supposed to be intense. Excuse me. And damage was supposed to, it was supposed to be a toll on you. What you weren't supposed to go into battle, charging, not worrying about, yourself. It was definitely more geared to be a resource that you needed to micromanage, but it did go a little bit too far in the fact that they were a little bit strict on it. So at first, resting for characters only regained 1 HP per day of rest. So this isn't per hour, no short rest, no long rest, 1 HP per day of rest. And at that point, magical healing was available through spells like Cure Light Wounds, and you also had like regular, health potions. But in the respect of resting, yeah, exactly, Dungeon. That's exactly it. 1 HP, and because the whole point, the whole mindset behind it was that, death was always right around the corner. Too hardcore, yeah. And again, this was back when these games, you got to realize, like, when people were playing these games, a lot of it was more RP based, a lot of it was more in town based. It wasn't as what people are as used to with encounter. It was a combat game, but even back then, a lot of the combat was also like early was mass combat, like large combat. So the idea of losing health really was intricate to the idea that you were in survival mode. You were always life or death. So yes, very, very strict. Again, not something that I really liked. I prefer to modify these rules because moving on even into 2nd edition, they kept very strict. And again, it continued with natural healing rate. So this is, again, only natural healing, no other feats or abilities attached, or like what am I thinking? What's the word? Racial abilities or anything else like that, right? But just a natural healing rate stayed at 1 HP per day of rest. But you could get additional HP if you completed basically bed rest. So a day of rest was similar to what we consider a long rest now. It's essentially 8 hours of undisturbed rest where you're not doing actions, you're not doing magic, you could be hanging out. It doesn't have to be full on sleep, but it does have to be, continuous. Now with the bed rest, this is basically no strenuous activity at all. So where rest, you can just, be hanging out by the fire, cooking, walking around the house. Whereas with the bed rest, it is no activity whatsoever, and at that point you were able to double it and get twice your normal amount, so you can get 2 hit points. And then I think this is where I diverge in second edition, where I use a modified version where it's you get your standard rest is always going to be 1 per day, and that's more, I treat that more as a background, but I do it to where you get 1 plus your constitution modifier per hour of rest, of like uninterrupted rest. I feel like that's a little bit better at a rate. It's I need to do more of a fixing, because I will be announcing this on screen too once I have it finished, but I will be doing a major change to how hit points work in High Point, and I'm also going to be making a huge change to the mindset of combat in general. So I'll probably be announcing that in a couple weeks as well. But yeah, some fun stuff for what I'm going to be changing in High Point. But yeah, with natural healing being at 1 per day and only bed rest being able to increase it to 2 or even more, I still like adding in the constitution modifier, because that directly affects how much health you get anyway per level up. So I prefer to utilize that for how much your body's able to recover. And again, looking at HP is, it's more than just physical damage. It's not just how much you're bleeding and all of that, but it's also just how much fatigue you have and everything else like that. Adding in a constitution modifier for that recovery does allow you to represent your ability to recover and your body's ability to snap back. And I think that when it comes to like leveling up, it's hard to do lower levels, because when you only have like less than 10 hit points, saying that you can recover to full in only a couple hours, but a veteran would have to take, someone who's like 20th level would have to take a lot longer. That's where I have a hard time like adjusting it for like the hourly rate. Which I've thought about doing just like the 1 HP plus your constitution modifier per day, but I don't know. It's still one of those things where it's really clunky. It's just because it depends on how much HP your players have and how you want to deal with the HP. But in general, this is brutal. Like these early editions were absolutely brutal. But again, they were also heavily focusing on the fact of the party balance having a healer. A lot of this realistically was expecting you to visit clerics, buy potions, have a healer in the party. This was not meant for you. Like this was, again, the idea that you're adventuring. The average person doesn't put their life at risk every single day, right? Like the average person in an archaic setting back when, if you think about what first and second edition were based around, people were, having issues if they got a splinter and got an infection. It was that kind of stuff. If you didn't have a cleric in town and you got an infection, you're pretty much done for, right? So if you think from that concept, adventurers going out in the wild and risking their lives and not having a healer with them or not having a way to heal them is really dangerous. And the mindset that you do that one too many times and you can't recover yourself, I get where their mindset was. I get how the gameplay used to be that way, but when you look at it from the prism of how D&D is now, how often encounters happen, I see why this is a little difficult to understand. But again, thinking about it from the point of view of a well-prepared party in a world where people are not risking their lives on a daily basis, and on top of that, having a healer and having requisitions, I think it makes sense, but it is rough. It is absolutely rough. But that's, again, where the focus was party, was really about party build and party preparation. Now, in third edition, it's the exact same thing. 1 HP, 1 HP per. Oh, I'm sorry. No. Third edition did change it. Sorry, I misread my notes here. So third edition and 3.5 did make the very first change out of the really bad and archaic 1 HP per level. And at this point, characters are able to be healed 1 hit point per character level per night of rest. And then complete bed rest doubles this rate. Now, this is a lot more closer to what I want to do with HP, especially once I transition some of how HP is going to be used and how final blows are going to be used. This is a lot more in line with what I like, because having it based off of your level, that really solves the issue of how quickly, or how much a character should be able to gain back the more that they've tried and tested themselves, the more that they're, kind of like going to the gym, right? The more you go to the gym, the more your body recovers from what you do to it. So this really lets that be represented, though I would probably still add the addition of the Constitution modifier, or even say that you can do the same thing, but the Constitution modifier is added with the bed rest. I don't know. I'll play around with that a little bit more, but I'm liking the third editions so far with the 1 hit point per level per night of rest, because again, it still focuses on the idea that damage isn't something to just be brushed off, and without proper care, without actual medical attention or magical attention, it is going to be a detriment. It is going to be something that's going to stick with you and not something that you want to just deal with on your own. So again, this is just standard natural rest without any outside influence. So I'm kind of liking this. I think this one's the best one so far. But again, still third edition, really focused on party build, party preparation, having potions, having spells. And they did introduce, however, one additional option. So you still had your magical healing options. Your natural healing was a little bit better, but third edition did introduce the healing skill. What's going on? You died of dysentery. Yeah, that would be a really interesting thing to add into a D&D campaign. Kage and I have talked before about doing more with diseases in our campaigns, because diseases are kind of just whatever in D&D a lot of the times. Hoi Lepa, good morning. How you doing? It's been a while. Nice to see you. But yeah, we want to do more with diseases. So I like the idea of adding in things like during travel, like being able to have to worry about getting diseases during like long travel. I think that's something that's like underutilized. But welcome. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for chatting. So yes, third edition added a new healing ability. So you had natural healing, which is just based on rest. You had your magical healing, and then you had a healing skill. Now this basically allowed characters to provide first aid. So it was the first time we actually had like, I think you had like a medicine. No, you don't even think you had medicine in second edition. Unless you added that kind of a proficiency. But basic wise, the healing skill allowed you to provide first aid. It allowed you to do kind of like treat wounds, basically what the medicine skill allows you to do now. But it did allow you, when you did this and you applied what they had a couple different feats. You could like remove poison, help with disease, but one of the features that this skill allowed you to do was use what do they call it, long-term care. It was an ability called long-term care. And this was kind of basically in line with someone who did bed rest. So if someone was doing bed rest, or any kind of rest, but if you could tie them both in together, the healing skill would allow you to basically double the base. So if you had healing skill and applied it to someone who was resting, they could double their natural rate, which was 1 hit point per level. Per the character, and then bed rest also doubled that. So you could basically give them triple the amount if you had the healing skill and they took a bed rest. So it was another way to work around it that didn't require spells, and that was actually a really good way to get around it, in my opinion, because then you could have someone in the party have this, or 2 people have it, and basically anybody who was actually damaged or near near 1 HP, this could basically get them up overnight. Like this could get them basically in 1 day back up to full. So I really like this addition to this edition, and I think that once I make my final changes to HP, final blows, and knockouts and everything else like that in High Point, I think I'm gonna lean much heavier into how 3rd edition did this, because for me, this is the closest it's felt like to representing what the characters are in game. You know, it represents their level, it represents their experience with what they've done, and it allows them to still have a relatively, it's not strong, it's still relatively weak, but a relatively not useless HP grind or HP regen, right? Because in the earlier editions, if you're 10th level and you have 80 hit points, what is 1 hit point a day? That kind of isn't the same, right? But it does make sense when you look at it from the point of view of, regardless of, if you're near fatal wounds, it's going to take you just as long to recover. But I like the idea that representing that people, of the adventuring type, that you've grown accustomed to being able to recover from these wounds. So I don't know. I really like the idea of having a bolstered natural healing state, having an additional healing skill, having all of the magic preparation, and once that's all added together, actually being able to see a more realistic and more tangible a set of events for healing, in my opinion. I really like that. Uh-oh. Automod. Did you get auto-modded from me? I didn't get a pop-up from that. Yeah, Oregon Trail is exactly how I think everyone did. Oh, okay. Thanks, Vixie. I appreciate you. Okay, yeah, I was like, what automod? Yeah, good old Oregon Trail. They had an update a couple years ago. I believe that there's like a reboot of Oregon Trail. I don't know if it's on Steam or not, but they updated it and made it more modern. I haven't gotten it yet, but I might do that on stream. That would be really interesting to do an old school Oregon Trail game. So I really like what 3rd edition did to healing. I think that so far, to me, out of all of the editions, kind of nailed it as the most. You need it? All right. Well, maybe at the end of the stream, if you can remember, if you can remind me, I'll look it up and I'll see if I can find out where I saw that. But I remember seeing like a YouTube video of someone playing, and it had like I don't know if it was a mod or if it was an actual game, but someone had some updated graphics that looked intense. But I would totally play that online and see if people would follow that. That would be interesting. And then, yeah, so that was 3rd edition. So 4th edition, we normally don't talk about this, especially because 4th edition usually just doesn't do absolutely anything. But in this particular case, they did do a pretty big change, of course. So we'll talk about it from the aspect of history, because it happened. Oh, with the Windows bug if it's on an older version. I know that they said that they've pretty much found out what the issue is, and they've put out the fix. So it's now just making sure everyone gets the fix. But I heard the fix is relatively easy. It was an actual line of code that everybody can delete in the update that everyone has access to. So yay, that's gonna be fun. There's also an Oregon Trail board game. I gotta make a note of that. Vixie, we have to make a note of that. Oregon Trail board game, that I wanna go to the nearest game shop. I wanna find that. I wanna do that at the next game night. That's a way to lose friendships right there. Everyone thought Monopoly was the problem. All right, so 4th edition. 4th edition finally changed everything up, so it was no more worried about hit points per day. What they did was they introduced the healing surges, and this was the concept of basically a pool of a healing, like a pool of healing of health points that you could use to essentially use your surges and regain your hit points during short rests. And these short rests in 4th edition were only about 5 minutes long, so I would always think like a short rest is like an hour if a long rest is 8 hours, so it's kind of weird. But 4th edition considered a 5-minute rest, basically short rests and between encounters. So even though you may not be able to have a short rest, as long as you have 5 minutes, you could use these surges and regain some hit points. So I did find that interesting. It's kind of like a second wind. I don't know if I really agree with that, because it's more like I would account that as more like you're getting an adrenaline rush, but you're ignoring yourself. You're not really like healing or getting anything back. So Yeah, I don't know. I'm not entirely sure I would agree with being able to just like get a pool of hit points back. I do like the idea of having like surges, like an adrenaline surge, and having like 20 temporary HP be able to be available to you. Stuff like that I really like, because that plays into the idea that you're pushing yourself beyond your means. But when you're talking about natural hit points, it's a lot harder to explain how you can like recover, because you can overcome fatigue, but you can't recover from fatigue in the moment. Like, right? Like, you can push beyond yourself. You can go for that extra, set, right? You can go for that extra pull up. You can go for that extra bench press, but you aren't losing fatigue. Like, you're still going to be gaining fatigue. You're just pushing yourself beyond when you normally would stop, right? So I like the idea of adding temporary hit points to push beyond it, because once those are gone, your body's still doing what your body's still doing, right? You're still at that stage, which I think is a lot more realistic and representative of what's happening during combat and what's happening to your character. I have 20 minutes between rounds of combat, never feel rested. Yeah, exactly. One thing about Magic Healing I don't like is that it can never go wrong by rules as written. Yes. Now, so Hoyleba, I'm glad you're bringing that up, because there should be like a little section. I should do like a little animation for like YouTube videos, but like do like a little like segment where when people bring things up about why Vortex likes second edition. Now, one reason why I really like second edition, Hoylepa, and why I have second edition as my primary, or one of the reasons, right? I've done the histories. You guys know a lot of the reasons why I prefer second edition, but one of those reasons is how Magic works. And they have a mechanic called Spellfell. And basically every single time you go to cast a spell, regardless of what the spell's effects are, regardless if it's an attack spell and you have an additional roll, or you have any other rolls to do, every time you want to cast a spell, you have to do a spell fail. And it was a percentile roll. And depending upon your intelligence score, which is why spellcasters were always intelligence based, based on your intelligence score and your modifier would influence your spell fail. Now, if you were a strong wizard, if you basically had 15 or higher, you were basically going to be guaranteed almost success, and your spell fail would be like 1%, which basically means don't roll an odd one on percentiles and your spell went off. But there was always a 1% chance. And then under 15, the lower your intelligence got, the higher that spell fail got, up to basically, I think, I forget what level in second edition you lost the ability to cast spells, but just below that was like a 99 or a 90%. I think the lowest you can go is 90% at spell fail. So you could technically have a character that could cast magic, but could also have such detriment that you had a 90% chance to fail. And that is one thing that I absolutely love and still keep from second edition, even though I made some modifications to how magic works. Spell fail, especially when it comes to like casting spells, like known spells, I always loved the idea that like you could get a word, you could flub a word wrong, you could hiccup, you could mess up the finger, you like the finger gesture, you could drop the item. Like, I always loved the idea that you're so well practiced, but everyone makes a mistake once in a while. And you're absolutely right. Even with healing, there's no chance of it backfiring or being an issue. And I don't know, that's just exactly what I feel like is I don't know. I absolutely think that's the way to go, is have a mechanic that allows you to sorry, lost my train of thought there. Like I said, it's been a long day. But have a mechanic that allows magic to have a backfire, right? So one thing I like to do outside of the spell fail and have magic spells be able to not be cast, I also like being able to have a similar role for magical items. Like if you have a wand of magic, I like the idea that you would be able to have the one backfire on you, right? If the one gets damaged or something like that. Like, not like just basically, right? Like a magical weapon that has that is in pristine condition should work as intended. But I like the idea of having like giving out magical weapons, but having them at different grades, right? So there's pristine, as in like, freshly made, unused, and then there's like worn. So maybe, it's, you can describe it as how many charges it's lost. It looks a little bit worn, but even in a battle, if you drop it, right? If you like roll bad on decks and you drop it on the ground, if it gets dirty, if it gets hit by an enemy attack, these things could make it to where it has a potential to backfire or cause the spell to go off inaccurately or incorrectly. So that's what I'm really, really thinking about, again, some of the changes and some of the things that I like about second edition and why I've adapted that is because having the ability to have magic fail, I think is integral to the risk of using magic. Otherwise, like you said, having healing magic that just never fails, I don't know. It just seems like it's a why wouldn't everybody who could cast magic, why isn't that the first thing they learn? Like the infallible magic of healing, right? So yeah, good point. Could just say no multi-class martial magic. Interesting. I'm curious. So how would the multi-classing work? Like, or what do you mean by what would that fix in terms of not multi-classing? I don't follow the train of logic, but that tracks with the rest of today. So please help me out here. So fourth edition, while I'm waiting for that, let's look through. So fourth edition, we had the healing surges. I'm not really a fan of those. Short and extended rest. Short rests were allowed for characters to recover, but these were... So these were basically short rests would give you, I think, your hit die. Healing surges, you had the pool, and then you had extended rests or long rests, which gave you all of your stuff back, your HP back, as well as your healing surges, your daily powers and things like that. And then, of course, they also had like daily powers and things like that would also allow for different types of healing. So really interesting set because they had like the short rest, which you had hit die, and then you had long rest, which just refreshed everything, and then you had these healing surges, which were able to be used at any point. It's interesting, not the way that I would like to go about it. So what do we see here? So if your spell fail with low intelligence, barbed fighters would never get a spell off. Oh, gotcha. Well, so in second edition, there are more limitations to who can cast magic. So other than just intelligence, there are racial... I don't follow all of the racial ones because they only had like 5 races back then, so I don't really bother following that. But there are other ways to, definitely restrict people from magic. But yeah, that would be interesting. The barbed fighter not being able to get it off just due to the low intelligence. I mean, it is interesting because your barbarian side being able to removes the idea to cast magic, which I think Kage brought this up the other day. I want to say he brought it up the other day. There is apparently a barbarian subclass out there somewhere that can cast magic. I gotta look this up. I don't know if it was him. I want to say it was him on one of the streams, or maybe it was off stream. But there's a rumor that there's a magic casting barbarian, and I'm very interested to look that up and see if that's a thing, because that's kind of just been that cornerstone of barbarian, right? Of just you don't cast magic as a barbarian. So I want to know what that's all about. It might just be a homebrew thing, someone trying to break the system, but we'll find out. But back to rest. And then, of course, we're going to end on Path of Wild. Oh, that might be it. That made a lot of sense. So what I meant by like it only had the 5 races is a lot of the times like when they were talking about restrictions. So like when they had... certain things restricted for like racial restrictions, the restrictions weren't that broad. A lot of the supplemental stuff that came from second edition did broaden it a lot, but a lot of the like prime book, like the DMG and the player's handbook, really only listed like the five primary. So that's what I meant by that. But definitely a good point. That's again one of the reasons why I really like second edition that I go over in my Ordnance a High Point series. Is second edition, in my opinion, is one of the most expandable in terms of taking the rules as they are and branching that off and making it just be able to go beyond its limits, even in terms of like leveling and things like that. So yeah, second edition has a special place in my heart for that. But I do have a 5-point or a 5-episode, 5-part, not 5-point, 5-part episode series of the Origins of High Point. If you're ever interested, I have that on our YouTube channel. What would you say? I think about it, it's interesting that no healing spells function over intelligence. What do they normally? What stat do healing spells normally cover in 5th edition? Big Dungeon, do you know that offhand? Do you know healing spells? What if any of them have like it's wisdom or charisma? Fascinating. But that does track with 5th edition, though. 5th edition did, in the way that they streamlined things, they did start to separate a lot more in terms of the individualized magic. So, like, separating out things like that. That would track, because 2nd edition, again, was... The base rules were still pretty strict for some of the base rules. Sorry. Hoylep answered for me. I was just wondering if you had happened to know what types of healing spells, like what stats they were, but he had already answered with the wisdom and charisma, because I wasn't actually sure offhand. Interesting. Okay. I will have to look at that one. Maybe I'm going to write that down as an idea for me to go take a look at. Because I have, well, maybe we'll see something in my other notes, because I don't remember if I specifically looked at when spells broke apart. What would that be? I'll think about that later. That's another episode idea for another time. So we're going to do a little bit of a quick summary for y'all, because most of everybody knows 5th edition. But when it comes to resting in 5th edition, we all know about our short rests, which allows you to recover your hit die. You have your long rests, which is typically your 8 hours of rest, and that's going to give you all of your, your maximum hit die, and resetting all of your daily abilities. And of course, it basically it's a lot more focused on the aspect of just doing your rest and being able to quickly churn out, your next encounter. Definitely a lot more of the focus of 5th edition, but it also definitely wants you to, it's also a more focus on your time management. It makes you want to make sure that you're understanding how much time you're spending doing each of these. Do you have time for your short and long rests, and things of that sort. And then of course, potions and healing and everything else like that. Just add all to that, but the short and long rest seem to be the kind of the crowning king right now, and I think that just makes sense more for the way that the more fast-paced gaming that we see with 5th edition. I do think that it's a lot more approachable with short and long rest. It's a lot easier to digest, but again, personally, I'm still saying that the 3rd edition resting mechanic is absolutely where I would be. The idea that it increases with you. I mean, you hear Kage and I talk about this all the time, where we like things tied to proficiency modifier in 5th edition, because that goes up with you as you level up. In 3rd edition, having the amount of HP you gain back for resting go up with your level is absolutely, I think, fantastic. I think adding plus that on top of your constitution modifier is also, I think, it's just a better bang for your buck over time. So I think I might be leaning into that a lot more for the way that I do healing and High Point moving forward in terms of resting. Cure casters that you can magic bards, paladins, and druids. None uses intelligence to heal. Interesting. Yeah. So yeah, nothing uses intelligence to heal. We'll have to double. Yeah, I'll have to look because yeah, second edition, the spell fail was just a general for like spell scrolls and casting magic. It didn't apply to. I don't think that it didn't typically apply to. I think other like innate kind of magic, like it didn't apply to cantrips and things like that. So there were a lot of limitations on when and where you could when and where you could fail as well. But again, I really do like the option to fail. I think that it's a necessary mechanic to make magic feel risky and to make it always feel like you always should be practicing and always making sure that you're on top of it. A lot of onus was put on the player back in the day, but definitely would take more time to get used to, at least after 5th edition. I agree. And again, I fully understand, 9 times out of 10, I understand what 5th edition does in order to make it more streamlined and more approachable to a wider audience. But mechanically speaking, sometimes I just have a hard time fitting the logic and the narrative around these mechanics, and that's just more big on me for me and gaming and being a DM. I much prefer how I'm going to make the narrative work and how I'm going to make those mechanics make sense to the characters than just have a streamlined system that is easy to understand. But that's the kind of the whole point: finding your niche, finding what's comfortable, and finding that system. Which is why I love doing these history ofs, is giving everybody an example of what D&D has done over the years, how they've modified and adapted to the different types of gamers and the different players that they've had over the years, but also showing that there's a lot of different ways to do it, and trying to encourage that idea of what y'all can come up with. I'm really excited to talk about the history of hit points in my realm, but I want to finalize that before I talk about it on stream. So hopefully that'll be coming in the next couple weeks to talk about that. So yes, so that was the history of rest and resting and gaining hit points back from resting in D&D. So the next topic that we're going to go over, we're making good time. Like I said, I'm not going to be going probably the whole time tonight, but I do want to get over this next topic. So moving right along, we are going to now look at the history of healing, just a basic run over of healing. I wanted to kind of just see some notes that I could pull out. This isn't going to be an exhaustive one, but yeah, we are going to go over the history of healing, and then I will be taking it out from there. Well, look, yeah, always, I am so happy to always be here every Monday and Friday for your entertainment. So glad that you can show up when you do, even though it's like almost like sunrise every time you show up, which is absolutely insane, but I appreciate it, absolutely. All right, so moving on to the history of healing in general. So with first edition, still going back to first edition, we had 3 basic types of healing when it came to first edition. You had the natural healing, which is what we've just talked about previously, being able to gain 1 hit point per day for a rest, and then a bed rest or an extended rest gave you more time. And what's interesting is that normal rest in first edition, I forgot to mention this last time, but normal rest in first edition was typically up to 7 days. So typically you could rest for up to 7 days and get 7 hit points back, and then anything beyond that would have to be considered an extended rest. And then of course you had your bed rest, which was absolute no action, no movement, which would basically double that, so you'd get 2 hit points a day for bed rest. An extended rest was just anything beyond a week. So the second type of magic, or the second type of healing that you can get in first edition, was your magical healing. So this was pretty much limited to your clerics, your druids, and your paladins, and their primary source of obviously was healing magic. You had things like cure light wounds, all the way from like a 1d8. You had cure serious wounds, which gave you a 2d8 plus 1 hit points. So again, first edition, you weren't seeing large HP pools, so these were decent healing spells, especially when you were looking at 1 per day for rest or 2 per day for bed rest. And of course you had scrolls and things like that they could also carry around. And then the third type of healing were your potion healing. So you had potions of healing that basically varied anywhere from like 1d4 all the way up to 2d4 plus 2, and then of course you could homebrew a little bit more even. A bard sleeps with 1,000 tabaxis, and he's a legend, but just one house cat. Never go back to the tavern. That's fucking funny right there. Oh, that was. I laughed a little bit too hard at that. I mean, no. Big Dungeon, you have the absolute. That's the correct. That's the correct one right there. That's how you're supposed to react. Oh man. Oh boy. Okay, where was I? All right, so the third type of healing that you get in first edition was your healing potions. Okay, I already did that. Okay, so that was basically it. So first edition, you could rest, you could basically hope that somebody had magic, or you could have potions, and that's where I was talking about earlier. First and second edition was all about focusing on party and preparedness, right? So you wanted to make sure that you had party balance, and you want to make sure that you had party preparation. So that's where you're going to see a lot of that in this, also in the next one as well. So second edition, again, you're looking a little bit more at your, we already talked about the natural healing is exactly the same. You're getting that 1 point per day. You could do bed rest, which gets a little bit more, but you also had your magical healing, you had your potions, you basically had all of the same thing. But there was, oh, okay, so I think I misspoke earlier, because earlier I think this is one that was added in third edition, but my notes were a little bit scrambled. So it looks like the healing proficiency actually was introduced in second edition. So second edition did have a healing proficiency, which did allow not only initial care right out the gate, tending to major wounds right out there, stopping bleeding, resetting bones, but it would also allow you to increase your hit points per day that you rested. So yeah, I misspoke earlier because I said that was a third edition, and that was actually from second edition. But yeah, so other than magical healing, potions, and resting, you also were able to get this proficiency, which allowed you to either care for yourself or somebody else. And during their long rests, you were able to increase the amount that they healed. Third edition did not do as much changes in terms of, like we already talked about, the natural healing got better, but outside of natural healing increasing, you still had your magic. They did increase some of the magical spells that you had access to, so we did get a wider range and much higher rates of magic or of a hit point gathering. I think that's when they also had some of the higher level heal spells introduced, which was really nice, because after a while you're like, hey, I'm level 18, lay on hands just isn't working for me anymore. So they started, 3.5, again, really came in, made a lot of good improvements, including those higher level magic spells. They improved the healing skill. I think that's where my note was incorrect, is they improved the healing skill. And this is where they allowed you to stabilize dying characters, because I think second edition, it was just for like minor wounds, stopping bleeding, resetting bones, and then like patching like minor scrapes and cuts. Third edition added the idea of stabilizing dying characters, and again, of course, during long-term care, you can increase their daily hit point range. And then, of course, your wands, your staffs, your potions, all of your various ways of other measures of healing. Now, with fourth edition, we've already talked about the healing surges, the short and long rests, or the short and extended rests that they called them. Now, fourth edition did have a variety of class abilities that they introduced, but again, with that, it's going into too much detail with fourth edition. But they did add in some specific abilities for classes to regain more HP, like some of the fighter classes, and I think barbarian classes, and I think the druid as well got some different buffs. And then also we got in fourth edition, they introduced the all the characters got basically a standard action called Second Wind, which allowed them to, during combat, basically regain hit points based off of their hit die. So that was a really cool thing. I really do like that idea. I prefer that as being either like a fighter specific trait, or, and I say fighter, but not just fighter, the class, but like fighter, barbarian, anything that's melee centric, or a feat that can be learned. I do like the idea of a second wind because, again, I treat it more like you're getting temporary HP because you're getting an adrenaline rush, you're ignoring the pain, you're pushing beyond your means, and when it's gone, you're going to go right back to feeling everything. But in that moment, having that second wind, I feel is like super clutch. And so I do like having that mechanic, but I don't like having would have learned how to do that. Again, like fighter, paladin, barbarian. Other than that, I feel like it would be a trait that you would have to learn, something that you would have to practice being able to, like, again, mentally and physically push back your means. Something you have to go, like how people do with the gym, right? You don't just go in the gym and lift the heaviest weights that you can possibly lift and not hurt yourself. You have to work up to being able to hurt yourself in a good way. So I kind of figure that's the better way of doing something like Second Wind. And yes, in 5th edition, it basically runs the same course. So you have your short and long rests, as we've already talked about. You have healing spells, but we also have more healing abilities. We're thinking of, things like Lay on Hands being more of an ability, whereas you have like Cure Wounds, Cure Light Wounds, Healing Word, and things of that sort, which is kind of, again, along the same path of what we've seen so far. You have your potions, and we still do have a couple healing options. Druids, like Wild Shape, like unique healing options with Wild Shape and Circle of Dreams. But one thing I have been noticing, and one thing I wanted to comment on regarding, like healing specifically, is when it came to rest, there definitely felt like there were major milestones that Wizards of the Coast and D&D went through. Excuse me. There excuse me. There seemed to be a lot of milestones when it came to the development of resting throughout D&D. But one thing I find really fascinating is that healing, like resting healing, being able to naturally heal, definitely went through its rigors. But outside of adding new healing spells and adding a couple class-specific ways to heal uniquely, healing really hasn't changed at all. And I feel like that's an overlooked area that should be, and I hope might be, addressed in these upcoming series of releases that we're seeing for the next series of D&D, because I really want to see more non-magical modes of healing, because right now we're seeing more spells, and it is nice to see some class features, but I would like to see more feats, things that any character could take that improve the ability of healing. And I get that there are some measure of like there's obviously some wounds that just need time or magic, right? Like I get, like you can't become a better doctor to make your arm, make a broken arm heal faster. Like a broken arm still needs time to heal, and without magic it's not going to heal overnight. But I feel like because HP can be much more representative of the mind state, the fatigue level, and all of this other stuff, I'd like to see more mechanical ways where someone can, like an herbalist can also learn like an herbalist feat, or an herbalist can learn ways to make different types of energizing potions, to where, again, like expanding who can be a healer and expanding the ways in which they can heal. It doesn't always have to be about damage, right? It can be a different direction, either mental or fatigue based, right? Like being able to make like an energy drink of some sorts. I feel like there's more opportunities, because healing is really just that. It's basically you either rest, you cast a spell, and maybe someone has a feature for themselves. But really, 5th edition got away with the idea of helping another person. Like, unless you have a spell, everyone can stop someone in the dying state, right? Like if someone's having their death save throws, anybody can run up to that character who's down and stabilize them. That's just now a basic, right? Before, you actually had to have like the proficiency, you had to be able to do that. Now anybody can stabilize, which I kind of disagree with. I get it, because for a fast-paced game like 5th edition, I totally understand why you'd want that, because again, people, half the team's going down, you just want to be able to get the party back up. But narratively speaking, not everybody would know how to do that. I kind of like the idea that a healer is the one that has that knowledge, and anybody being able to stabilize you just seems a little bit of a gimme, personally, which is why I kind of like how the original editions were doing it with the abilities and magic separate. That's the way I think I prefer to go about it. So I don't know. I'd like to see some new ideas on healing. I'd like to see, especially with some of the new subclasses that we've been getting for review. I'm really interested to see what people can come up with some new healing options. And I'm really hoping to see what you guys think about once I talk about my some of my new changes, some of my new permanent changes that I'll be doing with High Point. Everyone can stabilize. That takes away the emergency of the situation. Exactly, right? Like, I mean, I get it, because if you have a team of 6 and everyone gets spread out, I totally get, like, you just want the nearest person or anybody to be able to, like, stop one of your players from dying, because it's the idea of we want everyone to continue. We don't want to just lose somebody. But I feel like that's something that has, outside of a TPK, I feel like character loss is something that's been kind of shied away from in 5th edition. And just like Willip was pointing out, like, without the emergency factor, right? Without paying attention, like, you may want to keep your healer alive, but if everybody has potions and as long as everybody came into the fight with potions and everybody can stabilize, that means that you don't have to worry about your healer, right? Anybody can stabilize you, and then as soon as you're up, you just take the potion that's in your pocket. And that's kind of where I feel it takes away from the mindset that you should be guarding and protecting your healer and have a healer, or everybody should be ready to, have a healing potion on themselves and have a spare one if somebody goes down, and then you can go pop one for them, right? That or everybody, again, the party all says they have these like special sashes that they wear, and they all have 2 potions in them. So if one goes down, anybody can walk over and they know where the potion is, so they just grab the potion out of the down party stash and force feed them. Those are things that I would prefer narratively to see than just anybody can stabilize, personally, just because, again, it makes it more strategic than it does a gimme to the players who just kind of want to, like, keep moving forward with their actions instead of realizing the severity of the situation, or, like, the consequences. And again, yeah, with any intelligent foes, they do go for the healers. And I agree with that, but at the same time, one of my biggest issues that I take with a lot of other DMs, and this is something that I kind of want to do more episodes on, about like how I DM. One thing I would like to see is less metagaming from DMs, because one thing I've recognized is, like, it's one thing to say, well, obviously I would rather go for the guy in robes than the guy in plate armor. You know what I mean? Like, I can understand that mindset, but there's a lot of times that I've seen DMs out there just know which is the weakest character and just instinctually have the battle go towards targeting them. And the problem with that is it doesn't help take into account, like, the player's roleplay part, where identifying the weakest player isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do all the time, depending on the context. And with the option that DMs would be not using the metadata, it would be interesting to see how players can overcome that, right? Like, if all of the party wanted to all wear this, like, identical robes and then just have the armor underneath the robes, I wonder, that would be a really interesting way to outplay, like, a different narrative, right? Because then the enemy wouldn't be able to really identify who's who until, like, they actually attacked, right? But I do agree, there is a commonality of going after the healer first, just because obviously they're going to be the issue if they're keeping up the big damage dealers. But I think that's also, like you pointed out initially, with any intelligent foe. And that's where I like to, add in that spice of what level of information, does the enemy have, and changing that up can really help. They could be intelligent, but they could also, not have contextually the information that they need, or contextually have the advantage to take advantage, to take a hold of that situation, go after the healer or anything else like that. So, but it is a good point on intelligent foes. I think that's kind of a good thing, is you need to be more prepared. You can't just assume that every fight is just. Personally, I don't like assuming that every fight is just a mindless battle to the death. I kind of like having a narration and having a story and having a dialogue through combat, and having multiple options available other than just wait till everyone's dead. But that's not always easy. So I can, I can understand the, the different approaches. Oh, I was worried about our cleric because he was an idiot. Yeah, when you have the player who doesn't always make the best decisions and they decide to be the healer, you do kind of like go, well, do we need a paladin? Like we could use some backups. So just being on the foe as a smart wizard, it would definitely figure out who was the healer. Absolutely. And put myself in the villain's shoes. What would they do, really? Yeah. Well, and the same thing is put it in reverse. You would expect your players to do that, right? Like if you set up a combat with a healer, the whole point is, unfortunately, like a video game, right? The idea is you have a tier system. You can't just go after the big bad, because if you have one, if you have the big bad, but he has one mage healing him and one mage constantly casting shield, you kind of get that you have to take out the two first before you can go after him, right? Totally understandable that you would expect the players to do that approach. So players should expect that their healer is primary target, right? And that's where I think having fights that are of low intelligent enemies is a good way to get them kind of out of that comfort zone and getting them used to being a party and everybody involved. But I really think that having those like consequences of going after an intelligent enemy, knowing, hey, I've pinned you for the healer, I've pinned you for the wizard, and I've pinned you for the damage dealer. I'm staying away from you, and I'm targeting you too. Like, it makes sense to have that dynamic, but again, I kind of agree that putting onus on the player, making them realize that could and is going to probably happen, makes them realize that if you're gonna put yourself in a precarious situation, have a plan B, have a backup plan that once they realize who everyone is, don't let the healer be by themselves, or don't throw the healer in the middle of three people, right? Like, or have someone ready to back off and go protect them. Don't let don't let your tank get surrounded and can't move off the battlefield, and now all of your other guys don't have any protection, right? Like, that's something that the players, I think, feel like they don't need to be paying attention to, and I think that it's better to give them the consequences of not paying attention to that. Could also be an honor and glory thing. The goblins attack the bigger ones first because they get more prestige from it. See, that's another great way of thinking about adding the lore and the narrative to it. I love doing that with my encounters, where part of the thing that I like to do when I build my encounters is I don't just think of the balance of who they're fighting, but as I'm getting into the encounter, I put myself a little bit more in the shoes of those NPCs that I've selected, right? Like, why are they here? What is their intent? What are their agendas? What are their motives? What are their what's their current mood? What's their morale state? Because all of these things I like to take into account real quick before an encounter, because things like that, right? Like, if I say that one of these is gonna like be a little bit crazy and not do more strategic stuff, I'll play that particular NPC a little bit more erratically, giving the party unintentionally, but if they take it, they're giving the party a weak point in the encounter, right? I've sometimes chosen enemies to be very prideful. So if anyone taunts them, they'll be more likely to go aggro, which is great if you have a bard on the team who wants to do a vicious mockery. That's a great little perk because I add that in and no one knows about it. But then when the bard starts mouthing off, all of a sudden he becomes the big target, which is kind of, again, counterintuitive, right? You wouldn't want to necessarily go after a bard unless that's the primary healer. But I like adding those little bit of traits because just like, you talked about like having that honor and glory for goblin attacks, having those little mindsets, planting those little seeds in your NPCs right before the encounter to figure out how things are going to change. I'd like to do a morale system. And when I say a morale system, it's very basic. I basically just say, what's the general morale of the NPC party? And I may decide based on context of where the party is and what else is going on in the world and who the party is, I may select one or two of the individual NPCs to have a slightly different morale. So I may have it to where they're already slightly low morale, but one of them's really, really low. So halfway through the battle, if, I'll just have it to where at any point between, after like the second round, if the big bag goes down, these guys are going to run. Like their morale is so low, they're just going to ditch if these triggers happen. And so it's really fun to do that because I feel like it makes the combat feel more dynamic for the players because they don't know these triggers exist. But it makes combat, again, I like to take combat away from just the slug it out until everyone's down. I'm not a fan of every combat is life and death. Every combat goes until everyone's like swung their last sword. Like I don't like everything has to go to 0 HP. I like dynamicism. I like the fact that enemies can run or will go aggro or will switch targets or will act differently based on things that they know. I like adding in I'll decide whether or not certain NPCs can be reasoned with before an encounter, right? So if at any point the group tries to talk to them or get out of combat, I'll have like ideas of like, hey, up until this point, this guy can be talked to. And then after this point, like after half health, he's just going to, say, fuck you guys. Right. So these are little things that I like to do that just make it feel unique and interesting and throw different things at my players. I really like the goblin idea of just going after the biggest guy. Like I've never done that specific idea and I love that idea, but it's very reminiscent of the things that I like to do in terms of encounter building because I like to throw off the expectations. Like one of the ones I did, I really liked. It was in the Discord. It was when we were doing the Discord gaming. And I threw a giant troll and a very meekly wizard at them. And the troll was like, just very aggro. And they became very aware that it was obvious, like, their assertion was that the wizard was just controlling the troll, and all of that. But at the end of all of it, like at the end of the combat, since it was an arena fight, so no one like was taken out. At the end of it, they find out that the two were like best friends, and just they like take care of each other. The troll is kind of not necessarily a mindless brute, but a low intelligence brute, and the wizard is just a very unpopular, meek but very powerful wizard. So having been bullied, there was a situation where he saved the troll, and then the troll stopped him from being bullied, and basically kind of that whole backstory. But at first they thought it was a whole evil wizard controlling this troll and just doing these mind games, and then at the end of the fight they basically were just like taking care of each other and just like yeah good fight guys, like just totally like very humble creatures. But in combat, that context gets lost, right? Like you have a expectation of what you're facing, and then if you can find a way to not, just make that assumption that this is gonna be that life and death situation, it's kind of cool to just be like, oh, those NPCs were not like what I thought that they were, right? And being able, I think a big thing that DMs can do, you don't always have to make it obvious, but allowing de-escalation of combat, I think, is a huge tool any DM can have in their toolkit. Allowing players to start dialogue in the middle of combat, and actually have times where there's back and forth, awesome. Times where you can let them de-escalate it. Like one of my favorites was one of my players a long time ago was ambushed. Her character was by herself, got ambushed by 3 people, and one got a little bit too close, and she's like, I have an idea. Can I, he came close. Can I try to go for like a disarm maneuver and then step behind him and then like grapple him and basically like put my arm up to, like put my arm around his neck. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Do a disarm and then do a grapple. They're, contextually they were, they assumed that they had the upper hand, so their guard was down. She rolled incredibly well. And so I was like, okay, well, what are you going to do? You're just going to do the D&D thing and just murder hobo them? And no, she grabbed him, disarmed him, got behind him, put her, got him in a chokehold, and basically used her own dagger. Or I think she had claws at that point. I think, yeah, she was a hybrid, so she had claws. But basically, instead of just attacking him, basically threatened him, like kind of like, knife to the neck kind of situation, and then said that she yelled at the other 2 to back off. And I was just like, well, this is just a basic ambush, and now you're about to like you're in full range of like murder hoboing this guy. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, they stand down. And then she talked her way out of it and basically like got some information from them and let them go. but those kind of moments, right? That kind of caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting a non-murder hobo moment, but it was really cool. Like, they wanted to go after this, and I let my player just fully take it instead of doing, the more traditional thing of just, no, the fight goes on and you just continue moving. The idea being that you actually can control the situation and have NPCs that react properly. I really like that. I think that is a fantastic option for all DMs to be able to do. Vixie, was that your character? I don't know. Is that what you're laughing at? Was that your character, or was that? I thought that was somebody else's character. I thought that was the character that Ness was with for a while. But I don't know. Maybe it was you. Maybe I'm misremembering. That was early games. That was early days. Oh yeah. So thinking about like Big Dungeon, what you just said about the wizard is mad with power and thinks that he won't die. One thing that I like to do is anytime characters want to do things that are slightly out of bounds or slightly beyond what they should be able to do, allowing them to do it, but with potential consequences. And that idea of like when anyone who spellcasters, when they want to do something slightly beyond their more capabilities, let them do that, but start to make them have issues where they start to go mad or they start to hallucinate. Being able to do the whole thing where magic isn't static, magic isn't exactly how you know it, but the reason why it's on this spell the way it is, the reason why everyone does it the same way is because it's safe. Anything beyond that and you don't know what you're doing. So being able to have that option. I think you were there for that gaming session. I think that's why it sounds familiar. You might have been there for that gaming session, but I do remember that. That was such a great way of doing it. But yeah, DM tools, being able to de-escalate is one of them that I highly suggest. Yeah. No, that was it. That was the end. That was the end of that idea. But okay, so yeah, I think that's a pretty good position. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover was just the history of resting, the history of magic. I think that I want to do some more building of new ways to heal. I think that natural healing can be expanded upon. I think more healing skill sets can be expanded upon. I think there just needs to be a little bit of a different option than what we just have, what we've always had. I'd also like to see just some more unique ideas of how to go about long-term healing, right? Like if you have a situation where you can't magically heal, right? Like let's say a character takes a fall, and in one of the ways that you do the damage is that they break a bone, and like they break their arm. Instead of having just here's a spell and it's magically healed, how can the characters implement a way in which the person's healing, but they also have to continue, right? Like if they have a druid, can the druid, use like plant growth to like make a certain type of tree grow around their leg and then petrify it, so it works as a cast, right? Or some way to where they work out a solution to allow the healing process but still allow them to game and not just rest and sit in one spot. So I'll be coming up with some more of that, but I would like to see what you guys think as well. Also, I'd like to know what you guys think about the history of rest, history of healing, what you guys do, if you guys have any homebrew rules, if you guys do anything differently out there for your healing, let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you like this video. For those of you here with me in Twitch, if you guys are interested in giving me some topics to talk about, or if you want to talk about this offline with me or the rest of the community, or if you want to give me a homebrew review of any type for me to review on Monday, you can do that in the Discord, so that link is going into the chat for those on Twitch. And if you like this episode and you missed anything from the beginning, or if you want to see any of our previous episodes, you can see that on our VODs channel on YouTube. That link is also in the chat right now. That is going to be me, and that's going to be it for me for the rest of the day. It has been fantastic. I appreciate everybody that showed up. I know we had a lot of chatters today. I know Big Dungeon was here. Hoilepa was here. Solicious, thank you so much for showing up. It was fantastic to see you and chatting for the first time. I appreciate you showing up. I hope you liked what you saw. Please come back. I am here every Monday and Friday. Monday start at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Friday start 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Mondays are reviews, Fridays are topics. That's pretty much how we do it around here. And then we're going to be expanding the YouTube channel here shortly. So hopefully you guys check out for that. I really do hope that we hit affiliate in no time. Thank you so much, Dungeon. It's been fantastic. If you guys like to watch D&D gameplay, go check out Big Dungeon Energy. She does a lot of cool actual gameplay, and she's preparing for some stuff this weekend, so make sure to go check her out. Otherwise, that's going to be me. I really appreciate all of you for showing up. And yes, we'll be back on Monday. Kage will be rejoining me, and I don't know what the... actually, let me check out. Let me real quick. I know we haven't gotten it posted in the Discord just yet, but the next homebrew that we will be doing on Monday is... I already did the... oh, yes. We are going to do the Shinobi subclass for Rogue. I know Kage has been really, really interested in seeing that one. So join us on Monday for the from Pokeniners Shinobi subclass for Rogue. We will be doing that on Monday. Otherwise, I hope you all had a great week. I hope you have a fantastic weekend ahead of you. Have a great rest of your night. Cheers.